Glad to have you. Okay, you're recording. Thank you. And let's see. We have Hyman and Rifki, an elderly couple sitting on their porch in their rocking chairs, like Bruce is rocking back and forth, and enjoying life and thinking, wow, how wonderful that the children have grown now. We don't have to worry about them. And we can just be together. But Hyman says to Rifki, we're not going to live forever, and one of us may die soon. And he says, when one of us dies, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make that trip to Israel just like we've been planning all these years. Now, I know for the people in diaspora that may be a joke, but or it may be something that gets them upset because we wonder, come already. You've been talking about it all your lives. But in Chassidut, we talk about the inner meaning of the idea of coming to the land of Israel. That has to do with the spiritual development that we all need to get on with. And sometimes we put that off. We make that not important and we're complacent with where we are. And the whole idea of the Kabbalah that we're learning, the wisdom of the Kabbalah, what Baal Hasulam is teaching, is to get us on the path and to begin to develop. And I hope that you'll see that the ideas that we're talking about are actually an integration of Kabbalah and Hasidut, so that we're learning the process of creation and something that seems, much in spiritual heights, metaphysical truths, and so on. But it's something which is actually very much down to earth and related to how we are conducting our lives now. So it's time to get on board and to go to Eretz Israel, the Ruchani, the spiritual Eretz Israel, land of Israel. And we are in the middle of discussing this process of creation. I'm going to try to share here the text of Baal Hasulam's introduction to the wisdom of the Kabbalah. And we're learning section 5, which is a critical section that describes the character of the Sfirot. We talked about there being Keter, Chochmah, Bina, Tiferet, and Malchut. There's Keter, the crown, Chochmah, wisdom, Bina, understanding, Tiferet, beauty, and Malchut, kingship, where the Tiferet includes within it 6, sub-sphirot, if you will. And so that means there actually are 10 sphirot altogether, right? Whereas Keter, you talked about last time, is the source of all these sphirot. It's really the idea of creation that we talked about, God's desire to give to us, to that the whole creation should receive his divine quality of selfless giving, his light of wisdom. And in that very idea is included already in potential the created being that receives this light of wisdom from God. And so that's the potential, that's the source that there is in Keter. And then in Chochmah, as we discussed also last week, all that wisdom, all that light, all that revelation of God is given within the desire to receive it, but it's not, the desire to receive is not experienced. There's no lack because Chokhmah is created together with the light of Chokhmah, the light of wisdom that it wants to receive. And so, in some way, Chokhmah has it all, It has that complete revelation, but it's still lacking the pleasure that there is from experiencing the lack of that revelation and then receiving it. And so the process of creation continues. And I wrote here in the beginning of this section 5 a little preview of this process, which I'll read now. And then we'll jump down to Bina, which is where we left off, which is called the second mode after Chokhmah, which is the first mode of this process of creation. So I say that the completion of the vessel requires a progression through 4 modes. Chokhmah, as I said, all the light is clothed, and clothed in Kabbala means received. So all the light is received by the immense desire to receive, and the desire to receive is nullified by the love. There is no experience of the desire to receive. Bina, where the vessel is cut off from the light of Chokhmah, there's actually a decision to be a giver and not a receiver. And so Bina doesn't want to use the light of Chokhmah that it receives from Chokhmah, and then it therefore receives the light of Hasidim. And in just a minute, we'll talk more about the difference between the light of Chokhmah and the light of Hasidim. But essentially, the light of Chokhmah is the pleasure in being connected to the Creator and having that revelation. And the light of Hasidim is the pleasure there is in giving, in serving the Creator. And Tiferet is the next stage, where the vessel receives the light of Chasadim with an illumination of Chokhmah, just a bit of Chokhmah. It's Herat Chokhmah in Hebrew with an aleph, which means an illumination of Chokhmah. And then finally, Malchut, or kingship, where the light of Chokhmah is no longer clothed in the vessel, it's not received. There's now experience of revelation of God, and it longs for that. And so that is truly the vessel that is created, which is the desire to receive, which then, in the process of fixing the creation, will receive the revelation after having lacked it. And then the whole purpose of creation will be fulfilled in this wonderful end of time, which we refer to as the days of the Messiah, so the Mashiach, or as Gemar HaTikun, as the end of the fixing of creation. Okay, so now I need to scroll down to where we left off in discussing Bina. Oh, I know. I need to move this thing over to the left, and then I'll be able to scroll down easily. Okay. So we said following Chokhmah comes the second mode. And this corresponds to the letters. In fact, maybe I'll stop sharing this for a second, and I'll share the other document I created, the table of correspondence. Remember that we had how the sphirot that I have here, the crown, wisdom, understanding, beauty, kinship, are parallel to the words. Did I share it?
No.
I always forget. I forget to share it. I look at it. Okay, I gotta get used to it. There we go. Now I'm sharing. Okay, so we have here the 5 sphirot, and then corresponding the 5 worlds. And the reason I wanted to put it up now is to see the letters of God's name, where the keter is just the little tip of the yud, right? The kotso shel yud, and then the chokhmah is related to the yud. It's a small letter because here we're talking about a not having really created the vessel. Letters are vessels, and the chokhmah is not so much a vessel because it doesn't sense the desire to receive. And so it's a small letter. And then we have bina, which is the first hay, which is shaped like a hand, to receive the Chokhmah from Chokhmah. And then Tiferet is the Vav, which is a long line, sort of bringing down the revelation of God to another level where God is more hidden. In each one of these Sfirot, it's a process in which God is hidden. And then last, Hey, is the Malchut, which wants desperately, so to speak, to receive the revelation of God. It's an extended hand, like similar to Bina, but now at a much lower level. So that's the parallel to these between the Sfirot and the worlds and the letters. And in our, spiritual work, in our devotion to God, we're starting out from the bottom here in the Malchut or in the last Hay, and we're trying to work our way up, back up this ladder that's come down. We're learning the top down in the process of creation. And I should say that each of our souls goes through this process. It's not a one-time creation that was. This is a creation that is happening, as we said once, within every moment outside of time. And our souls include all these different levels, but we're not aware of the higher levels. And what we want to do is to connect to them. So that's our spiritual work. Okay, now I'll stop sharing this and I'll share the text that we were before. And so I was reading, how do I get rid of that? Okay. That follow it corresponds to first occurrence of the letter Hey of the Tetragrammaton, and this mode is called Bina, and the sphere of Chokhmah emanates the light of Chokhmah to Bina, but at some point, the vessel begins to become conscious of its receiving, says, I'm a receiver. And that's the quality of light that I'm receiving is all about giving, and I want to be a receiver. And I realize that this separates it from the creator who is giving, and therefore does not desire that separation. And this change in the vessel's awareness is the beginning of the shift to the Sfira Bina. So Baal Hasulam says, for in its second stage, the vessel of Chokhmah becomes stronger in similarity to the supernal light within it, the light of the revelation. And that is, there arises in the vessel of Chokhmah a desire to give to the emanator in accord with the nature, the light within it to be completely giving. So we see at the end of Chokhmah, that means that Chokhmah is not just, a single stage so that we can divide up reality into these 5 different stages. That's it. Actually, we can cut it up as finely as we want. Within Chokhmah itself, there are the 10 Sfirot, and in those 10 Sfirot, there are more 10 Sfirot. And so ad infinitum, so that our analysis here of these different qualities is just a general analysis. And there's within those qualities, then some more particularity that we're seeing here. Now that at the end of Chokhmah, it begins to want to be a giver and not a receiver. And that is an essential change in its character, which causes us to call it now a different Sfira, and we'll call it Bina. So the commentary here says the gradual descent from above also takes place within each Sfira. For this reason, Baal Hasulam writes of Chokhmah in its end stage. And the nature of Chokhmah is to receive light. But at its end, the light causes it to take on the giving nature of the light. And as stated in the oft-quoted Midrash on Lamentations, on Echa, the light of the Torah causes us to return to what is better. And you can find this in the Orach Chaim if you're interested. Thus, the light that fills Chokhmah eventually causes a shift in the vessel of Chokhmah from the desire to receive, desire to give, and this produces the transition from Chokhmah to Bina. So The defining characteristic of Bina is the desire to give. It would be a mistake, however, to think that Bina does not desire to receive. The desire to receive is the nature of creation and can never be completely nullified. That is our nature. All of creation has a desire to receive. The question is whether or not we experience that, whether or not we want to use that, but the desire to receive exists. And it's only if we experience the desire to receive, then we have not only a desire to receive, but also a longing. I think we talked about that last time, the difference between the desire and the longing. So there is a desire to receive in all the levels we speak about, including Bina. God alone has no desire to receive. Right? God is perfect, has no lack, and so no desire to receive at all. But that's not the nature of creation. And we really have no comprehension of what that mindset, what God's mind is like, what that could be like. We can only begin to get a taste of it as our own desire to give selflessly is revealed. Our own pure soul becomes to be revealed in small doses, and we can extrapolate then to get some sense anyway of what is beyond our comprehension.
Wait,
So
Aryeh
yeah,
question. All right, but is the desire to give that seems to come into existence by experiencing of the light, how is that compared uh, to the ability to choose between right and wrong? Is there an act of choosing here, or is there an automatic effect of the light that has nothing to do with the person's choice?
right. Good question. And the question of choice is a difficult philosophical question here. Is because if on the one hand, if we say that God is all there is, right? Ein od milvado, and God is running the show, and everything comes from God. So where is free choice? Everything comes from God. God is running the show. On the other hand, in our experience, we see that we are choosing this or that. And here in the process of creation, what we're talking about Bina making a choice not to be a receiver, but to be a giver.
Is it
So
choice? But you said otherwise. In Chachma already you're affected by the idea,
right
but
at
it
its
wasn't
end,
choice.
right? Yeah, exactly at its end, which then transitions to Bina. So we're really talking about Bina, where that choice lies. Okay, so the answer is paradox. That is, both things are true. Okay, on the one hand, the truth is that God is all there is, and God is creating this whole process. And this is part of the process of creation, that God, of course, is the creator, and he's bringing us through this process. On the other hand, the experience of the created being, in this case, we're referring to the created being as in the place of Bina, is having made a choice. Okay. So that's within our experience. And Baal Hasulam in general, in his approach to the idea of if our freedom of will, or freedom to make a choice, says that that occurs only in the present. That in the everything that was in the past, everything that we experience ourselves as having done and having made choices and so on, actually, that was God doing it. And we thank God for putting us through whatever we've been through. And the choices that we made are actually God having caused it to be the case that we would go in that direction. That's how we look at the past. And we learn from that past and understand how God has brought us to this place in the present. But in our present experience, we have a choice to do the good thing or some of the other things. Okay. And that is real. And that's where we make our choice. As soon as that becomes then past, then we will see that God did it. But now, at the present, we experience the freedom of choice. So it's not a philosophical answer. Is there free will, or is God determining everything? It's a practical answer on how we approach our lives and say that in the present, I have free will, and in the past, it was God that did it. And that's a way of handling the paradox that there being, contradictory truths that we both want to assert, and both that God is doing it all, and also that we have free will. So, in this very place that we're talking about of Bina, in some places you'll see that it's written that God caused that to be the case. In other places, you'll see that the created being made a choice, because in some sense, both of those are true. I hope that answers your question.
Well, it answers the question, from the philosophical paradox. But it seems that you're presenting a system that is automatic, right? In other words, where is there a human participation here, or does it just happen automatically? The light goes down from different stages, comes into various other lower stages. So are we doing anything? I don't understand. What is the human factor here? If it's all happening automatically, then why do we have to? Is there anything we're doing here except learning how it happens automatically?
The answer is yes. We are learning how to make wise choices. That's what I was learning, the wisdom here. And it is also true that God is creating the world and bringing it through this process. And it's the process of creation that God does. I'm sorry, Avi, but this is a paradox, and we have to find some way of holding both those things. Right. So we are now learning what you call automatic. It's not exactly automatic. It's maybe through, if you will, God's will, God's choice. But we're understanding the process as sort of necessarily following from certain principles that we accept here. We understand how God wants to give selflessly, and we understand how that creates a desire to receive, and how that desire to receive then goes through different transformations until it comes down to the level where it does not sense the existence of the creator at all. And that process can be seen as being one which necessarily follows one from the other. In that sense, it is automatic. And it can be seen as an experience of choices that are made. Both perspectives are true.
Okay. I mean, in light to further and along the same lines of that question, the Earth is here for, I don't know, billions of years, as is the universe, and we're here a small blip. So does this process, is it connected to human activity, or is it just, as obvious, it's a process that was from creation and goes on billions of years, and then what's triggering the process, so to speak? There is no receiver, in a sense, without people, unless all life forms receive, and it has really nothing to do with human interaction per se. It's just part of creation.
Right. Well, first of all, it has nothing to do with time, right? Billions of years doesn't mean not related to the issue. As I said, this is a process that our soul goes through, and actually all souls and all of creation goes through the process that we're learning about now. Where the human quality comes in is in the aspect of what's called the tikkun abriya, the fixing of creation, which takes place after. Now we see this process where the malchut is created, the created being is there without a revelation of God, desire, longing for that revelation, which it has a memory of, and wants to then come closer to God. And our choices then certainly in our viewpoint, in learning Torah and doing mitzvot and our tefillah and everything that we do, in the process of all the good deeds that we do and the correct choices that we make, are to purify our souls so that we will experience the revelation of God in our lives and in that way be united with God. That is our human task, which makes us partners in this process of creation so that God will have the fulfillment of the purpose of creation. That is but we haven't yet seen that. We're now just making things from top down, the creation, this ladder that the Baal Hasulam, the master of the ladder, is describing to us, of coming from the creator down to the created being. And then the process of the fixing of that is, something related to what we're learning here, and very much so, but that's not what we're discussing at the moment. That's all. Okay. Okay. So if we can, let's go on. We're learning about the character of Bina, and this will give us a sense of our soul, a very high level of our soul. Bina is the level of the world of Bria, the world of creation, okay, which is a very, very high level which the Zohar is writing about. And we have to climb up to the light, but first it's good to hear where that is, and what this idea of holiness and wanting to be like the creator is like. And that's the character of Bina, that it wants to be like the creator. So we say here, and by virtue of this desire, Baal Hasulam says, that has arisen within it, then in the second mode, a new light that is called the light of Chassidim, the light of benevolence, is drawn to the vessel from the emanator. So as I said, Chassidim means benevolence. The light of Chassidim develops the vessel's enjoyment in giving. That is because there is this joy in giving, then that gives the motivation to be more giving. Right? So that develops the vessel's enjoyment in giving. But what's the difference between the light of Chassidim and the light of Chokhmah? So Rabbi Baruch Shalom Ashlag, who is the firstborn son of Baal Hasulam, explains that the light of Chassidim is the satisfaction that comes from complete service to God, that is not conditional on receiving pleasure, totally desire to give to God. And this is the selfless desire to give. The light of Chokhmah means the pleasure in the revelation of God, and the light of Chassidim, again, is the pleasure in serving God. Okay, so these are depicted here as two lights, but we'll see as we go on how really that may not be the final word about it. Let's read on, and then I'll explain. So the progression of creation, which is what this book that we're learning is about, process from top down, is from above to below. And the light of Chokhmah is above the light of Chassidim. Okay, the light of Chassidim is a light that we experience by virtue of our work from below to above, from bottom to top. However, from the perspective of our spiritual work, from our bottom up, which does go from below to above, the light of Chassidim precedes the light of Chokhmah. We first have to do our spiritual work, and then we have the joy in connection to God, which is the light of Chokhmah. Now, first we need to attain the light of Chassidim and be willing to serve unconditionally, and afterwards the light of Chokhmah is received. And the higher our state of giving, the more we become able to experience God. So by refining ourselves more and more, we'll have a greater and greater revelation of God and experience the joy in that. Now, in truth, I say here, in some cases, it might be the other way, that an experience of God may come before the work, right? It may cause us to do the work. So that there are different levels here. Okay, so in this case, the light of Chokhmah arouses us to give, and then we constantly receive the light of Chassidim, and then the light of Chassidim brings us to an even deeper experience of God, so that in the end, Chassidim precedes the Chokhmah, even though there was a bit of Chokhmah that preceded the Chassidim. So it's a spiral that brings us on and on. We do work, we have some connection to God that gives us then the motivation to do more work, and we can refine ourselves more and have a closer connection to God. Now, we said before that Chokhmah received all the light from God. It was a complete vessel. It was a complete desire to receive, that received all the light. So then how do we say there's a new light now, Chassidim, which not in Chokhmah, but is in Bina? So there's two ways of answering this, okay? The first answer says that when we say Chokhmah includes all the light, it means that Chokhmah includes all the light that came from God's desire to bestow goodness. And this light of Chokhmah is called the light of the purpose of creation, God's purpose in wanting to give. And it's the light we were created to experience. In the end, that's what we need to experience. Now, another light, the Chassidim, is called the light of Tikkun, the light of the fixing of creation. And the role of this light is to prepare us to fulfill our purpose. So we weren't created just to give, but rather to receive God's gift of goodness. Right? So the goodness is the light of Chokhmah, the light of experience God. And to be able to experience the goodness, we first need to attain the state of giving. So the light of Chassidim develops our desire to love and give, and thus prepares us to be able to experience the light of Chokhmah. So Chokhmah, because it's a vessel of receiving the light of God, does not have the light of Chassidim, according to this answer, because it is a vessel for receiving and not a vessel for giving. And only a vessel for giving receives the light of Chassidim. The second answer says it a little bit differently. That it says that the light of Chokhmah does actually include the light of Chassidim. Why? Because light is a single unity. In reality, there is only one type of light, only one light that comes from God, not two kinds of light. God gives this kind of light or that kind of light. No, God gives light, and the light means the revelation of the divinity, right? So the way the light becomes revealed, the way God becomes revealed, depends on the vessel. And this is a key in understanding Kabbala in general, that really we can't talk about the light, right? Although that's what we do a lot. We talk about different kind of lights and this and light and that light, different levels of light and so on. But really, we're talking about the vessel, because it's the vessel that determines the kind of light. What desire that we have, what kind of conception we have of the divinity that we want to receive and be connected to, that desire determines what indeed is revealed to us when we become connected to God. So the way the light becomes revealed, I write here, however, depends on the vessel. In Chokhmah, the vessel wants to receive, and therefore the light is revealed as the light of Chokhmah. The light of Chokhmah then influences the vessel to want to give, and consequently a new revelation of light, that same light, which now we call chasadim, is experienced in Binah. But that's because it's a different vessel. Right? So because the light of Chachma gives rise to the light of Chasadim, we say that it includes it. And also because it's really one light, and it's just a matter of the vessel that determines whether we call the light Chachma or we call the light Chasadim. Okay, I mean, that's important to understand as we go on. And it's really, I think, only here, like in Baal Hasulam, you'll see such a clear explanation of these concepts. In Kabbalah, generally, what you'll learn is, all these different concepts, and without any explanation, really, of what it means. This light, this vessel, and this happens, that happens. Here, Baal Hasulam wants to give us a sense of really what we're talking about when we say Bina. And what exactly is the character of Bina, and so on, for all the different concepts of the Kabbalah. Okay, so we say, Baal Hasulam says, it's interesting, for this reason, the vessel is almost, Bina, is almost completely cut off from the light of Chokhmah, so that which the emanator has bestowed upon it, this light of Chokhmah. And this is because the light of Chokhmah is only received by its own vessel, by a vessel that wants to receive, which is the immense desire to receive in its full measure. And Bina is not there. Right? So Baal Hasulam here is describing these four stages, Chokhmah, Bina, Tiferet, Malkut, through which a complete vessel comes to formation. That's what we're trying to describe. And as we said above, the extensional light and its departure is what makes the vessel fit for its function. The sense of the longing for the connection, for the revelation of God, is created by having a taste of that revelation and then losing that, and then wanting it in a different form, and then losing that. And so it goes on throughout the whole process of creation. We're dividing it up in these four stages, and we'll see how that goes as we go further within this. Now, the extension of light occurs in Chokhmah. That was the extension. And then its departure occurs in Bina. Now, although the departure of light makes it possible for the vessel to experience the lack, right? Bina does not really want to lack the light. Bina, it repels the light because it wants to give and not receive. And since it did not specifically desire to be without the light of Chokhmah, so at its end stage, Bina begins to feel the lack of this light, because it really wants to be connected to the Creator, it wants the revelation, but it wants not to be a receiver, it wants to be a giver, right? Now, since the vessel of the light of Chokhmah is the desire to receive, Bina no longer has a vessel for the light of Chokhmah. So why does Baal Hasulam say, and this is an interesting point, that there is almost a complete separation from the light of Chokhmah? Why isn't there a complete separation? If Bina doesn't want to receive, it only wants to give, so we would expect that it would say that there is no light of Chokhmah whatsoever in Bina, but he says almost. Why almost? And here, Rav Gottlieb, and I have written it down here in translation, has provided 5 different answers to this question, which I think are important to get a sense of the character of Bina and to understand what's really going on here. Okay. So the first reason, and I have here listed as A, is that since the giving nature of the light of Ma is what causes the vessel to want to give instead of receive, some measure of the light needs to remain in the vessel, right? Because Bina wants to retain this desire to give. So therefore it needs the light of Ma to be there in order to create this desire to give. The light is there not in order that the vessel receive, but rather to instill the desire to give in the vessel. And that light of Chokhmah it's a light of experience God, and performs then these two functions. On the one hand, there is the pleasure, I write about here, in receiving. And in other sense, there's the second function, which is the feeling, the desire to give. So the lack of the first function of the revelation and the pleasure in that revelation, the connection to God, is what Bina begins to feel at its end. I say here, at its end, and when it begins to desire to receive Chokhmah once again. But it wants to retain always that character of the desire to give, which it received from the light of Chokhmah. So it's almost, it retains that character of the light of Chokhmah at every stage. That's the first answer.
Okay, wait, hold it, Aryeh. Just a clarification on some words here.
Yeah.
The
Yes.
light gives immense pleasure to the receiving vessel, and the light influences the vessel to become a giver, and not, you have to put in the word, not only a receiver, because as you said, we're always going to be have the sense of being a receiver. So
Right.
language here of not a receiver is not exactly accurate, I think, in the way you're presenting it, because it should be not only a receiver.
Okay. Thank you for that comment. That's a very good point. And we have to understand in general, Avi, in the discussion, on the one hand, there is the reality, and on the other hand, there is the experience of the reality. And we could also talk about our intentions as opposed to what actually exists within our soul. So that we always have within our soul the desire to receive. And in that sense, we're always a receiver. We are, in fact, actually receiving. However, we may not be connected to that desire to receive. That may not be what's motivating us. That may not be what we actually experiencing. So Bina is not wanting to experience the desire to receive. It doesn't want to be a receiver, even though in fact it is. And I mean, you might take a metaphor, say, a homeless billionaire, okay? But he's got $1 billion in the bank and stocks or investments, whatever. But he's living out in the street with nothing, okay? And he's doing that because maybe he wants to serve humanity in this way, serve God and helping others, be out there on the street, other people. But he's living with nothing, even though he's got $1 billion in the bank. That's Bina. It's got all the Chokhmah in the bank, so to speak. It's received all the Chokhmah from the sphere of Chokhmah, but it doesn't want to use it. It wants to be not a receiver and it wants to be only a giver. So it has it in a sense, but it's not experiencing the light of Chokhmah because it doesn't want to use it and it doesn't want to receive it. Okay. What it wants to do is only to serve, to give. Is that metaphor help you, Avi? And then understanding so that there's, on the one hand, the reality, and the other hand, the experience of that reality or the desire and the motivation that there is. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So then we're going to read now the second reason for understanding why it's almost a separation from the light of Chokhmah. So Baal Hasulam has said that the light of Chokhmah is actually the life force, what gives us life, so we say activates and motivates and enlivens all of creation. And for this reason, it's not possible for creation to be without Chokhmah. In reality, but Avi said, the Chokhmah is there. Even if the desire is only to give, there needs to be some reception of that Chokhmah to keep us alive, some minimal measure of experiencing God. And this life force needs to remain. So Bina repels only light of Chokhmah that is not essential. There's a little bit problematic with this answer, which I'm not going to go into now. It's not my favorite one, But nonetheless, this is one of the answers that Bavkoti gives. It says that there must be some light of Chokhmah there in order for Bina to continue. But again, as I said before, it may be that it's not so much wanting that or experiencing that. The third answer is important. Okay. Again, although we speak of two different lights, as we said before, the light of Chokhmah and the light of Chassidim are really the same light. There's only one light. And the apparent difference between them is due to the vessel that receives the light. So being a separation from the light of Chokhmah is in reality the description of Bina's interest in giving rather than receiving, because it's a different vessel. But in order to continue to forgo Chokhmah, Bina must continue to have Chokhmah. Again, the billionaire doesn't want to use his $1 billion, but he has it, right? And his choice not to use it will exist only so long as he has it. Okay? That's a choice that it wants to exist. So the difference between Chokhmah and Bina is a difference of attitude towards the same light that they both have. And now the next two answers are also important in understanding what's going on. The Aryeh says, when light departs, it leaves an impression. The technical term in Kabbala here is rishimo. You see everywhere in Kabbala, the rishimo is like a memory. Bina remembers the light of Chokhmah because she originally had the light. So Bina's memory of the light is why the separation is not complete. So who are we? We're not just the state of consciousness that we're in now, right? Which also all that we've been. We may remember it and that connects us to it, but even if we don't remember it, who we were is part of who we are. And the fact that Bina has the light and chose not to use it, right, but had the light, is part of who it has now. So there is a consciousness of light there. There is this rishimo, and that rishimo, that memory or that impression that is there, may be significant later on in order to reawaken the longing for the light that is not there. The fact that we know that we had it and what the wonderful thing that there was is something that can create then the desire to receive it again. So this Rishimo, this impression, is important, and throughout the process of what we see here of creation in the Kabbalah, that is, at least as the Aryeh describes that process, very significant. And lastly, Bina is able to receive, but it chooses not to do so. Okay, this is one way of looking at it, that it's making a choice. And so Bina's separation from the light of Chokhmah is not considered complete, because Bina can still receive the light of Chokhmah if she wants to. It's always there. The $1 billion is in the bank if you want to use it, and there has to be only because of the choice. So in some sense, it's not completely separated from the light of Chokhmah. So we said in this way, the light and the vessel in the second mode are completely different from those in the first mode, okay? And skipping down to the next bold print, for the vessel in the second mode is the desire to give, and the light is designated as the light of Chassidim, which is defined as the light that is drawn down by virtue of the attachment of the emanated to the emanator. So I just want to make it clear, it's often said that the light of Chassidim is a light from below to above. That's not precise. All light comes from above. Also the light of Chokhmah and the light of Chassidim. But the light of Chassidim is due to the spiritual work of the created being that wants to serve the created. And so that work is from below to above, and that then draws down this light, this sense of being indeed created, connected to the Creator, and receiving this light and the joy of giving. Okay. So it says here that first we need to make an effort to give, and then gradually the light of Hasidim shines in us, and within us arises a new nature of feeling great pleasure from giving. Okay, so I want to say that we're discussing here the formation of a vessel which will be separated from the Creator. But we see that Bina has indeed the quality of the Creator, this selfless giving. So it would seem that Bina would be, some sense, closer to the Creator than Chokhmah. Why do we say that this is a further distancing from the Creator? And that is precisely because we say that Bina made a choice. It's precisely because here there's something, Avi, which seems independent of the Creator. The created being, at least so it would seem, has made a choice to be a giver and not a receiver. But that choice is a choice that the created being makes, and so becomes then an identity of the created being that can make a choice that is separated from the choice of the Creator, or so it would seem, right? As we say in Hebrew, kiviyachol, so it would seem. And that apparent separation from the Creator then is what causes us to say that Bina is a further distancing from the Creator. Now, to understand the word Bina, which we translate as understanding, we have to reflect a little bit on this word in Hebrew. It means understanding, right? And in particular, our sages relate the concept of Bina to an understanding that comes from deriving one matter from another. That's what we do in our understanding. We connect different ideas, right, and try to make a coherent whole. So, davar mitoch davar, to understand one thing from another, is how we understand the quality of Bina. So Bina concludes, what is it learned? It concludes that it must desire to give due to the influence of the nature of the Creator, which is desired to give. That is, it has seen the quality of the light of Chokhmah and has deduced from that, oh, that's selfless giving. Oh, therefore, I need to be a selfless giver and not a receiver. And so that's understanding. That's Bina. And there's another meaning of Bina, I write here, due to its association with the word hitbonanut, which means contemplation. The same shorish, the same root, Bina, in the word hitbonanut. And our sages relate the concept of hitbonanut to contemplating what will be the outcome of an action. A human quality is that we can plan and we understand the connection between causes and effects, and we see. And in spirituality, the final outcome, what we're looking for, is always connection to God, divine revelation. So Bina realizes that by desiring to give, it will prepare the vessel to eventually receive the light of Chokhmah. So this is a plan, right? It's a desire to give, which is a separation from the light of Chokhmah, doesn't want to receive. And so it's a distancing, but it's a distancing in order that eventually there should be a union. And this is our spiritual work from below to above, from Bina to Chokhmah, that we do later on when we want to climb back up the ladder. But Baal Hasulam is now describing the process from above, the process of emanation. Okay. So he says that the light of Chokhmah is the essence and life force of the immanent being. And this is to say that we were created to experience God. That's what our soul is all about, and that's what it longs for. And this is the light of Chokhmah. The light of Chasadim is the light that prepares us for our purpose. But receiving that light is not the purpose itself. In other words, our purpose is not just to be a servant of God, but also to be connected to God, to be in union with God. And our motivation to live is our desire to receive the light of Chokhmah. That's what's pulling us in everything that we do to get to that union with God. And therefore, the essential life force of the created being is the light of Chokhmah, this experience of God that either we sense to a certain degree or we are longing for. And people who do not experience God at all are considered as dead by Chokhmah. They don't have any real life force. If you don't have a sense that God is present, or this longing to have that feeling, that sense, then in some sense, your life is not a life. You're dead. And so I just conclude then with this last section. And therefore, when the light within the eminent being is diminished, to have the character of the light of Chasadim, this light, this joy in giving, without Chokhmah at all, without the sense of connection to the Creator. So the second mode in its end stage is aroused to draw into itself some light of Chokhmah, to shine within the light of Chasadim that is within its vessel. And this arousal draws forth a certain measure of desire to receive. And that will be our theme for next time. Then we'll talk about Tiferet, which is the next stage in this process of creation, and next Sphira, which is sort of the heart of the created being. And then eventually we'll get to a Malchut, actually another stage. After a brief description of Tiferet, we'll get to Malchut, and then we can talk about that process of how we climb back up the ladder, having seen how each of us is experiencing that within our soul, this process of creation from above to below, and that draws us then to want to climb back up that ladder, to be back in union with God. I think that's so much for today. And next week I will not be here. I'll be in a vacation for Hanukkah. So I hope to see you in 2 weeks and have a very, very joyful Hanukkah. Okay.
Thank you, Aryeh. Thank you.